Thank you all again for your prayers and your support. So far, my classes have been doing well. Today, my infamous third period, whom I was most worried about, a little more rowdy than usual today, but nothing like what I was anticipating so far. So I appreciate your prayers and support, and continue to pray for all my students. They need your help. They need your prayers, whether they are aware of it or not. So I appreciate that. Well, tonight I want to get right to our Bible study, but first of all, let's go over the theme of our current study, which is a journey through the entire scriptures. What is the theme verse for the Bible? John 20:31, and it states,
"These words are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that in me you may have life everlasting."
Very good. So, all together, everyone, these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. We will continue to review this until you memorize it. Okay? It is a good and holy thing to memorize the Word of God. It really comes in handy when you least or most need it, when you least expect it. My knowledge of the Scriptures, my familiarity with the Scriptures have come from years and years of evangelization, of teaching, of answering people's questions, of research on my own, of going deeper into the Scriptures. And I can tell you that memorizing the Scriptures is as much a Catholic thing as it is anything else. I've mentioned before great saints who had memorized large portions of the Scriptures. We do well to memorize the Scriptures ourselves. And as if you want a why should I do this, Psalm 119, 11. Psalm 119, verse 11 says, "I have laid up your word in my heart that I might not sin against you." So David himself, one of the greatest kings of Israel, pointed out that hiding the word in your heart, memorizing it, committing it so that your head as well as your heart knew the Word of God, was there to prevent sin in your life. And since we're talking about the fall from grace, this is a perfect way of dealing with sin in our lives. Memorizing the Scriptures is a good way to help combat it, because the more we fill our minds and our hearts with the Word of God and act on it accordingly, the more we are going to be transformed by that power. We underestimate the power of the book that's in your hands right now. We underestimate it. Okay? This is the living Word of God. And we went over all of that. Okay? That this is an incarnational reality. That just as Jesus was as much man as he was God, he was 100% man like you and I are. 100%. He was also 100% God. And he was without sin. In the same way, the Scriptures are written 100% by human men. Just like you and me, 100% human men, but moved by God in such a way that not one word got in here that God did not want. Got it? And it's 100% free of error. Just like Jesus was without sin, though he was human, so the Scriptures are written by men, but without error. There is no error in here, whether we're talking about history or the truths of our faith. All of the truths are true in here. That's why we have to understand how to read the Word of God. because we've already went over this. How do we read the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis? Do we take it for absolute fact as it is? No. How do we take it? Poetically, metaphorically. There is a real event that happened here, but it is told in a poetic fashion. It is the truth of the real event that we need to believe, not how it was told down through the centuries. Okay? We've been down this path before. I don't want to keep beating a dead horse. But it is important when talking with those who would challenge the scriptures, those who would challenge their veracity, those that would challenge their truth, to say, how can you believe these bunch of fairy tales? You really believe God made the world in 6 days? And you could say, wait. We believe that God made the world, whether it took 6 days or 6 billion years to complete. That's not what the scriptures are meant to tell us. The poetic fashion by which the 6 days of creation are told to us tells a greater truth. Not about the scientific reality of the universe, but about the covenant that God made with the universe that he did create. Did you catch that? Because the poetic way in which the 6 days of creation are laid out paints a picture of how God took basic darkness and light and eventually created everything. And then he blessed it and joined himself to it out of love. That's the covenant relationship he had. That's what we need to get out of it, not whether it was 6 billion years old or 6 days old. You see what I mean? That's the kind of truth, and that's the kind of rational, faith-filled response that we need to develop in our modern world. Otherwise, a lot of people are not going to take us seriously. Okay? And you're up against a large Christian population, non-Catholic Christian population that does take this literally and will fight and say, no, God did make the world in 6 literal days. The world is only 6,000 years old according to the Bible. Because we believe that the Word of God is the Word of God, and what God says, he means. Do you see that? And those are the people that Bill Maher and other atheists like to point out and say, these people are nuts. They're just completely blind to science and scientific truth, and we can't talk to them. They're so blinded by their faith that they have no real explanation of anything. And then they will point you to so many evangelical Christians who have fallen away from the faith because they can't, in good conscience, reconcile these kinds of extreme views. I just read recently of another prominent Christian artist who basically has renounced the faith. And I read the story and I ask myself, why would this person who for many years has made a living on writing Christian worship songs, have been a part of a megachurch, had been going there for years and years and years, all of a sudden decide that the Christian message is just one faith among many, that there's nothing really special about Christianity. And I think part of it has to do with this kind of fundamental literalism that is so prominent in evangelical Christianity, that takes the book of Genesis so literally. And when good thinking people look at it, they can't reconcile themselves to it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes. They find it hard. It's like, how can you really look at the, are you saying all the scientists are in some great deception telling us that the universe is billions of years old, and yet the Bible seems to think that it's 6,000, and it's like, who are we to believe anymore? Are we to just discount all of our science and just say, oh, they're all under a deception? it's all a conspiracy. They're trying to steal our faith away from God. And I go, no, God isn't that way. See, this also points to a fundamental difference between how we relate to God. You know, you just don't know God like I do. I've walked with him a long time, and I'm sure they have too, and they would have their stories. But there's something that's missing, something that is not quite right in it. And part of it has to do with, frankly, faulty theology. Faulty theology. Evangelical Protestant theology is faulty in its view of salvation, of the human condition, of what the goal of human history is all about, the nature of evil, the nature of sin, and of salvation. What is redemption all about? It's more than just saving your sorry soul and getting you into heaven. That's a part of it. It's a good part of it. I'm not discounting it. But the redemption that Jesus brings transformed the entire universe. The whole universe was affected by the sin of Adam and Eve. I mean, the whole universe was affected. And when Jesus came, he redeemed not just humans, but the whole universe. Read in Isaiah 60 through 66 about how the lion will lay with the lamb and the leopard will share its food with the calf and so forth. These images of this tranquility in nature is part of the imagery of this redemption of the entire universe that happened. The whole universe was affected by this. Because, why? What do the plants and animals have anything to do with the sin of Adam and Eve? Well, because God put them in charge of the entire universe. He said, you shall have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds and the air and all that stuff, right? You are the king and queen of the entire world. And by disobedience, God expelled them from that position. So the whole universal structure was upset by this. Instead of nature serving man, now man is against nature. Nature is against man. God said thorns and thistles will grow instead of the fruits of the trees of the garden. You see what I mean? And when Jesus came, he said all things will become new. All things. In fact, the famous verse, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that word world is actually cosmos in Greek. The word where we get the word cosmos or universe. If he meant the planet Earth, he would have used the word ge, G-E, ge. That's the Greek word for the earth, where we get the word geometry from, for example, which means the measurement of the earth, or geology, the study of the earth. Ge is the word for earth. If he meant for God so loved the earth, he would have used that, but he said cosmos, the universe. God so loved the universe, the creation, that he sent his Son. To do what? Redeem mankind who was in charge of it. And we read in St. Paul's letter to the Romans, in Romans 8, how the whole cosmos groans as a woman in travail, waiting for the revelation of the sons of God, waiting for the fullness of redemption. The whole universe is waiting for the final resurrection, waiting for the final turnaround, when death will be overthrown, when everything that Jesus accomplished in rising from the dead is fully realized. Right now, we're in a waiting period. Jesus has won, but we're waiting for the fullness of redemption. All of this is connected to this story in Genesis chapter 3. All of this. All of this. So the death on the cross is far more reaching than just getting our souls into heaven. And I think this is, again, where evangelical Christianity misses it. When they come knocking on your door saying, have you been saved? They're motivated out of a good-hearted meaning. They're trying to save your soul from hell. Well, that's a very noble intent. I wish more Catholics were interested in that idea, frankly. But saying this prayer after me and giving your heart to Jesus is more than that. It's more than that. And I don't mean just the one-time prayer, once saved, always saved theology that's faulty. That's an element of it. But it's more than that. Jesus calls us to participate in his redemptive work of being a co-redeemer with him in redeeming the planet. We talk about Our Lady being co-redemptrix. Have you heard of that? Where she is called co-redemptrix because of her unity with Jesus, that she shares in a redemptive ability of redeeming the world by saying yes to being the Mother of God. In the same way, that invitation extends to every one of us. We are all asked to be co-redeemers with Jesus. All of us. All of us are called to be co-redeemers. We are all called to save this world from sin. All of us. How? Dying on the cross? No, no, no. Jesus already did that. We're called to walk in love and obedience to him. And that is the redemption that brings redemption to the world. And if you don't believe that, then you haven't been reading the lives of the saints. What are you talking about, Chip? Well, I can think of a very popular saint that I know all of you know about, St. Francis of Assisi.